course, the cloud. This is the Todd Capital Millionaire Podcast, episode 138. My name is Charles Oglesby, also known as Todd Millionaire, founder and director of the Todd Capital Investment Club, also the founder of Todd Acquisitions, also the founder of Todd Vending, also the founder of Todd, what do we call that thing? Like Todd Barbershop or something? I don't know, but we call it something. Nevertheless, make sure you leave a rating or a review. We like 5-star reviews. Reviews are how we move up in the rankings, which means we get more exposure, which means more people get to hear the good word. Thank you all for tuning in. The purpose of this podcast is to share the stories of successful African-American business owners and investors so that they can hear the stories of successful examples because they exist. We want people to learn that business and investing are a team sport and the keys to financial success and generational wealth. With us today, we have a special guest. He goes by the name of Legend's Dad. His government name is Terrance Clark. He is the owner of 150 units. Successful investor out in the East Coast. He has a very prominent presence on Twitter. Gets a lot of retweets, a lot of likes. So I think the show is going to get us a lot of traction. It's also going to get him a lot of exposure. I think you guys are going to be blessed by the interview. So with that, welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate that.
So the number one question is always, what was life like growing up?
So for me, it's funny. Life was like just like a fun time, man. Like I grew up into sports, two-parent household, kind of a strange story. My parents were divorced for 10 years and got remarried when I was 16. So, but other than that, you know, life was great, man. I grew up in a suburb household out in Delaware.
So what's interesting about your story is a lot of people, they get into real estate and they're probably first generation, but you inherited a lot of your portfolio. So can you talk to us about what that was like?
So one, it's strange because I haven't yet inherited anything. I'm just like a small portion of the team, right? So our team consists of a bunch of our family members. So how that kind of happened was not planned. It wasn't anything that we had. Okay, it's going to be step one. You're going to do this, then you're going to do that. It was kind of something that just happened. You know, we all were in the middle of our lives, and through circumstances, we all got more involved. So I moved out to North Carolina. I got my broker's license, and I've been here for 4 years, and I have been very blessed in the times that I've been here. So just fortunate for that.
So my question is, what brought you to Twitter, specifically Black Wealth Twitter?
So it's funny because I didn't know that I was headed to that direction of Twitter. Like I found like there might have been like a couple of tweets. I think you're one of the original people that I found on Twitter. There was things that, you know, when you look at just trying to put yourself around people who have a similar mindset, try to make sure you're taking in good content, because I feel like, you know, you probably can attest, but when you're listening to a whole bunch of music, just social media, you know, sometimes we don't take in the best content, and that really, I would say, could focus which way you move. So once I found you, I kind of found other people, and it just kind of dove in from there. And I was like, man, this is like some really good stuff and help me focus, you know, where I want to go in life.
I feel like that is key. I was in the office, and this sounds really crazy, but I was in the office and I was talking to the receptionist, and the receptionist was telling me about going to 7-Eleven to get a hot dog. And I was like, I'm not going to 7-Eleven to get a hot dog. And then like later on that day, I found myself at 7-Eleven getting a hot dog. And what's crazy is like subconsciously, the things you hear and the things you see, they become a part of you. And so I think that's important because like, despite your education level, despite your accomplishments, despite where you were raised, the family you're around, unfortunately, what you become around becomes a part of you. And so it's important to, on purpose, intentionally put yourself in the right environment if you want to get the results from those. Because I realized, like, when I used to work with Jewish Al, like Jewish Al didn't wear the flashy watch. So like you would feel out of place if you wore a flashy watch. And so therefore you're putting all your energy and effort into assets as opposed to flashy watches because you don't want to stand out. You just become kind of what your environment is. So that's dope. You said that. You guys have been acquiring more deals lately. So can you talk to us about like what that looks like? What do you guys look for in a deal before you acquire it? And how are you guys going about kind of just bringing that into the portfolio?
So generally speaking, we like to look for value add. Value add is like our key, especially in North Carolina, because we've been very blessed to build solid relationships with contractors. Our contractors, I know you're not a big fan of them, but our contractors, you know, they're very good, straightforward, like working people. Like they just really want to make sure that they have constant work and that, to keep a relationship good. So we've been blessed for that. And that's what we look for in a deal, is to go in, basically look, mismanaged properties are a key. Google reviews are like, tell a big story. When people are upset, they certainly will get online and tell you about it. So when we're scouting a property, that's a lot of things about what we look for, is like the mismanagement side. It's something, the signs of show distress.
That's really cool. Nobody's ever said that on the show, is Google reviews. So you guys are looking for value adds that aren't just like construction value adds, but are also customer service value adds.
Yeah, because if you have a quick turn, a lot of times you can't raise that rent. Most of the people that are in commercial multifamilies are taking out huge loans on the property too. So it's important to be quick in their case. But if you're not doing it that way, then you can really take your time to get a good tenant in there. You could be at the top of the market, and you have a lot more flexibility there.
That's actually, I never heard anybody say that, because everybody's burring out there. And if you're burring, you might not be putting the best tenant in place. You might be like, I need to get a tenant in there so I can refi it, because the goal is really the refi, not the tenant placement. That's key.
And yeah, I mean, the thing about burring is you could do it all day, but at the end of the day, if the market turns and you have to reduce your rent, then what? You know what I mean? So I think it's best to where people are telling you to go in these deals at 70, 80%. If you could find deals that are better at 60, 65% to be leveraged, I think that's going to put you in a position to, to be in a good position if the market does turn, but still be good enough to where you could expand and scale.
So how do you find a deal that's 60% LTV? Because a lot of people, they think that's just like impossible. They're like, I need to get 70%, 80%, hopefully, especially if they're coming behind a wholesaler. So how do you find something that's that good of a deal?
So if you can't find it at 65%, then you need to be able to bring capital to the deal. It's very important to be strong there. You don't always want to be at the bank asking, hey, me, do you guys got some money for me? If you're smart, a lot of things, again, when we're looking to shave money, we're looking to cut expenses. Where can we cut our expenses that are give us a better cash flow, allow us to stack more money quicker so we can go in better positions in the deal?
I like it. I like it a lot. So where do you guys plan on going next? Like, what is the long-term goal for the portfolio?
Long-term goal, honestly, is development. So for us, we look more community. Two of the properties under management both have daycare centers that we kind of inherited. One has its grand opening tomorrow, so that's was a very exciting part of our journey in the last 5 years to open up a daycare center. I have a son it's going to be his first day there, so that's amazing for me to have watched that process. And then the second location that has a daycare that we just started the process to open. So development is definitely key. Looking at community, big aspect of community. We want to do things like have financial literacy seminars, provide jobs, housing, affordable housing too. There's affordable housing has a big bang for your buck if you know what you're doing.
I feel like affordable housing is something people overlook. I don't know why they overlook it. I know in California, the conversation is that it doesn't make sense to build affordable housing because of the permit costs and the builder fees and the cost of land. but it just doesn't make sense to buy property that nobody can afford. That's like buying a bunch of, like building a bunch of S classes. Like everybody doesn't want an S class and they can't all afford an S class, but we're just building them because, hey, hypothetically, if we could sell it for $100,000 and it costs us $40,000 to build it, we can make money. But if we build a bunch of E classes or S class or C classes, we can't make any money. I feel like in that one particular instance, the world is in for some hurt. But it's interesting because more and more people are saying affordable housing. You're saying it. I think a lot of multifamily guys are saying affordable housing. Can we expand on that, like numbers wise, what it looks like to build affordable housing? Because I think that people still think it's unrealistic and unattainable.
Honestly, I couldn't really expand on it for you because I have not done that. So for us, it's, when you're talking long term, that's what the next step is kind of learn that process. I've been drooling over the idea of picking up a piece of land and taking basically, the tax credits that they award to build affordable housing. But I'm just kind of on the iceberg of like learning the process. I feel like when you look at it, for us, the reason why it makes sense is just the community aspect. Is the fact that you're always going to, no matter what in the world, just the numbers, you're always going to have that price point where people need help. There's always going to be a demographic of people who are financially struggling in the world. So to stay in that realm as far as providing housing, it's like a no-brainer, especially if the government's going to give you money for it.
100%. So one of the things that I've seen you touch on a few times, not as much as I would like, but I think that it's cool that you do provide. Every time you kind of drop a thread on this, I kind of tune in, and it's the car business. Can you talk about your experience in the car business and how you've had success there?
Like that's like my bread and butter, honestly. So outside of the real estate, like that's where I built my living. I've made my first six-figure check in automotive sales. So I have 8 years of history in the car business as a salesperson, a finance manager, and a floor leader. But one of the things that helped me shape a business that I'm really putting out there right now is like car buying consulting. And one of the things that helped me shape that was actually real estate. So when I went and took my real estate course and got through all of the education side, I actually realized, put two and two together, that part of what the brokerage service of real estate is about protection. And part of what the customer hates about the car buying process is the fact that they don't have anybody that stands in their corner. So, what I've thought about doing is, relieving the stress points. So the time that it takes, and then the transparency, and just standing on the side of the consumer to help them through the process.
Yeah. You dropped something recently and it says something about like, there is somebody who was bragging about how much money they made off of a sale. And you were talking about how they made all this money, but like it wasn't, I guess, really ethical in how they did it. And that's why, like, I hear you talk about your business, and I think it's so necessary. And I want to see you make it happen. I'm willing to help you make it happen, either through promotion or getting you clients, whatever I can do, because I feel like it's definitely in need. A lot of people, they walk in and they're like, they don't even know they're getting
You're going
hustled.
out a little bit, but
My bad. Well, I was saying that sometimes that Wi-Fi messes up. Let me know when you can hear me. You back? Hmm. Oh, you came back.
Yeah, I got it. I don't know. I've never ever had connectivity issues where I'm sitting at ever. Like never ever.
I think the streaming thing makes it difficult, but I don't know. I've had some issues with mine. I thought it was my fault this time, but apparently not this time.
No, it was me.
So I guess the question would be, what tips do you have for people who are looking to buy a car successfully?
So the first thing somebody needs to do is they really need to assess their driving habits. I mean, that's one thing that I see that people really like, they really struggle with. I hear all the time people say, oh, I'm going to buy my car cash. Oh, I'm going to finance a car. Oh, I'm going to lease a car. And they really have no means as to why they do what as far as, their actual situation. It's always, oh, well, it's cheaper. You really don't know it's cheaper until you know your situation. So that would be like the number one tip I would give, is to really understand your driving profile.
So I know this question is going to be it depends type answer, but
Sure.
I guess we'll have a conversation around that. And the question is, what are your thoughts and opinions around leasing or buying?
So generally speaking, it's going to make sense for the majority of people to lease a vehicle. And the reason is, no matter what level you're on, no matter if you're trying to buy a $5,000 car, if you have enough money to buy a $100,000 car, generally speaking, most people don't keep their cars long enough to own them.
Right.
The only time people bring up depreciation, or the depreciation matters, is if you're not using the vehicle to its full use. A vehicle's life cycle, in theory, is probably between 10 and 15 years, right? So if something's depreciating at 15%, if I don't keep it the whole time until my break even, then I have to worry about depreciation. But if I break even on it, then really everything else is, I've made my money back. So most people should lease. Short answer.
What are some tips in regards to financing a vehicle? Because I think you spoke to this, and I think it kind of speaks to the conversation you were saying about the guy who said he made all this money on that deal. What tips do you have for people to avoid situations like that?
So the first thing that someone should do, the reason why that person made a lot of money on that deal is a couple of different things. There was undisclosed amounts of rebates. The customer also didn't work their trade-in at the right part of the process. So if you want to finance a vehicle, no matter how you're buying the vehicle, finance or lease, the first thing you need to know is what your vehicle is worth. Don't work a deal until you know what your vehicle is worth. You got to know if you're upside down in it, if you have equity in it, or what. But you don't want to get to the point where now the dealership's playing with numbers on both sides, because that's really all it is. The dealership's padding the deal like a wholesaler would, a fix and flipper would, and they're just playing with the numbers at the end of the day. The more information you could have early on, the better you'll do. So if you can get your trade-in information early, if you can get established with one of your own lenders to get interest rates early, that's going to help you. If you assess your needs for any extended warranty products early, that's going to help you. Don't go into the dealership and wait until you sign all the paperwork and then let the finance manager tell you, hey, I think you need this warranty, because now you're on the spot, right? Because they tell you in there. I've done the job. They tell you today at times properly prepare for your so you need or not the best decision because you're doing it quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So be prepared. That makes so much sense. It's like you don't want them to tell you what your vehicle's worth, because a lot of times people, they'll drive their car in there and they're looking for a new car. And then when it comes to talk trade-in, the dealership is telling you what it's worth as opposed to you telling yourself what it's worth, because then they can kind of like lowball you and they'll sell it for a profit. But then their lowball is, I mean, you taking an L. So that makes a lot of sense. This question is not business or real estate related, but the question is, what is one thing that you would buy if money was not an issue?
If money was no issue, I would buy like probably 3,000 acres of land and just build like my own like infrastructure, like schools, everything. That's what I would do with my money. I would build an infrastructure, like starting with like the youth. Like I like kids to me are like, because they're blank slate. Any like if I could do that, that would be like my ultimate dream.
What was your most successful deal?
So most successful deal is probably the one I'm waiting on, right? But no, the most successful deal is probably the one that we closed last. It was a 64 unit out in Eden, North Carolina. The reason why I would say is money wise, I don't really look at life in a money aspect. Like I think money just kind of comes and goes in a cycle, but from a success standpoint, we were able to hire 2 new family members. We were able to, take on a place that has a daycare that we'll be able to open for the community. So I would say that as a deal that I was a part of, like as a broker, that's my most successful.
So how do you guys find deals like that?
So I don't think anything is by coincidence, but we don't actually look for them. It's just like by the grace of God. God understands what we have in our heart as far as like community and building other people up around me, and he puts us in situations where those opportunities just kind of happen. I feel like you asked me a while back about like how I grew up. I grew up living in the suburbs, but spending most of my time in like inner city, like urban areas. So where I was spending most of my time at didn't look anything like where I was laying my head. And so going to school during the day and all that, it looked very different for me from where I spent majority of my time. So I grew up in a school where I was like one of 2 Black kids in my class. Like I've always been able to balance, but being older and like reflecting, just being like a resource and somebody that people can come to is like very important to me. Community and building people up is very important.
So multifamily financing is something that a lot of people don't know about. Everybody kind of thinks FHA or a conventional loan or a 203K loan. How does financing on the multifamily, level look?
Honestly, I just did our first finance deal. We don't typically do too many finances. Being at this stage where we're at, we've just been fortunate to kind of move swiftly with cash. But this time, I would say, going through it my first time, it was kind of a headache that I would say. Honestly, no. Because to me, so I have a finance background in the car business, and I've been able to understand risk as far as what the bank looks at, even when I understand their criteria as far as like a commercial deal is concerned. And for me, I think right now, because it could be because people feel that we're on a brink of the bubble and that everybody's buying at the top. The process I thought was just a lot more difficult than what it had to be. We moved in a 1031 exchange to defer, capital gains. We went into our deal over 20% down. Most commercial lenders are going to be at 75% LTV. We were there, and I mean, I just felt like it was more of a hassle than anything. But I would say use your resources. Don't get held up on one lender because you feel like, hey, things are progressing. Keep things progressing with multiple lenders, because you just never know. You don't want to get into the process. You don't want to get that far into the process and then feel that your hands are tied because of the time frame, especially considering a 1031 exchange with all the dates and things that go with it.
So 1031 exchange, can you explain that? I don't think people know what 1031 exchange is, so I don't want to just gloss over that.
So a lot of people and wholesalers probably run into this a lot, because you get people that are saying, oh, well, I don't want to get taxed on the money that I make on this property. So a 1031 exchange allows you to put money into what's called a qualified fund. And basically you're allowed to reinvest the money and if you had debt, you have to keep the same debt. But if not, you're allowed to reinvest the money and not, it doesn't have to be a similar asset, but it has to be an asset. And you have to, and that will defer your capital gain. So it's a good strategy if you don't want to go see Uncle Sam right away. Now, you have to keep those properties for a certain period of time, which, again, things that I'm still trying to get familiar on, or you will have to pay the gains for whatever amount of years. So there's a couple of guys on Twitter, especially finance guys, that will know that stuff a lot better than me, that I have just been kind of taking heed and trying to understand. But yeah, it's a good strategy, and I wouldn't put it over opportunity zones though right now, as far as what I know about the two.
So you mentioned that you guys usually buy properties in cash. Are you guys like just pulling the rents and reinvesting the rents, or how does that look?
So we don't buy too often. Usually we like to buy and hold. These some of the properties that we sold recently are things that we've held for years and years and years, probably 15, 20 years or so. So those are things that they've had equity. We were in New York prior to being in North Carolina. That's where my grandparents started their portfolio, was in New York. So that's how we're able to kind of do cash. I mean, I know people know about how they've heard the stories about the New York market in the past and the type of returns that it's had. So, but if you're paying attention to New York, you also see the type of laws and things that are happening. So that's kind of what's helped. That's kind of what's encouraged us to move on from there.
So you mentioned your grandparents. I'm not sure if you know the story, but if you do, can you talk to us about how they got started?
They are the original house hackers. So when you talk about house hacking, that's who I think of. It's crazy because before I ever even heard that story or knew that story, it's the only way that I will ever consider buying a piece of real estate they bought a 4-family and rented it out, then fixed it up. My grandfather was very good with his hands, so he could do all the work. They fixed it up. They refinanced. They bought another 4-family. So they had 2 4-families, went from 4 to 8, and then 8 to continue to basically where we're at today. So they are the original house hackers. I, for some reason, for the life of me, can't understand why young people go out and buy that dream house and need to have it. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to look at, but if you're talking long-term wealth, that's just one of the sacrifices you can make while you're young for a big payoff in the end.
And the crazy part about it is, like, you can do a few different things. You can house hack and live uncomfortably, or you can go to work and get insulted. But but it's like you gotta pick one. But the crazy part is like you gotta get real estate on your side. And so when I hear that story, I hear, yeah, you have your working income, yeah, you have your personal savings, but if you buy the right property, soon that property starts investing for you. and you don't have to do anything. Then property starts investing for you. Then that next property, now you got 8 doors investing for you. Now you can do the next deal, the next deal, the next deal. And I think we really discount the power of real estate. Like, we think that we got to do all the work, not that the real estate can do some of the work or most of the work or more work than we can ever do. Because at that point in time, you got 8 people working to make you rich, as opposed to just you making yourself rich. And you only have this much time, energy, and effort. But if you can get 8 people paying you half of their income, now you have the income of 4 people investing on your behalf. Plus, you still have your own income. Like, I think that's dope. Hearing that story is super, super dope.
And it really didn't pan out the way that my grandfather would have liked. If it was up to him, it would have. Our business kind of skipped like a generation. We had a management company that we were using, and it was what it was. We weren't really paying attention. No moves were really being made. Time passed by, and that's what it was. But that's why I talk so heavily about, you could build something. You and I could both build something, be rock solid. If we don't put a plan in place for our kids and our kids' kids, as far as like something that is known, as verbalized, that you're working towards, it could all go to nothing, and it really can. So we were fortunate to catch it at the right time, and then kind of shift our mindset to grow and make more of it.
Speaking of, that was one of the questions that I had, and it was, how did they do that successfully? How did they transition into the next generation? I think I lost you again. You back? I see you, but I can't. I don't know. I can hear now, but
I can hear you now.
all right. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna ask you a few quick questions. I'm calling this the final 4. The first question is, who is somebody that you look up to and why?
Somebody I look up to. I'll say I look up to my dad, man. My dad is like, he's a big part of my life. And why I look up to him is because he has so many opportunities to go the wrong way. And I feel like he just decided not to do that because he understood bigger picture. He had a family to provide for, didn't have his dad when he was young. So I feel like he made that a priority. And that's why I look up to him.
What is your favorite business or real estate book?
My favorite business or real estate book, I hate to say it, but definitely Rich Dad Poor Dad is definitely the book that really, it just gave me like a more clear-eyed view of like what I really felt like I was headed towards. Like I really felt like I could segment the fact that I didn't want to be an employee. I don't want to have a business that I'm having to do all the work constantly. I wanted to create a system that basically will allow me to, live my life. So that's definitely I would say my favorite book.
What sets apart successful investors from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
They don't have a clear understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. You have to be able to know that you have to have something that is pushing you past all of the headache, all of the heartbreak and the trauma that comes with doing it, because it's a up and down business. You know, you could get on a roll and then something halts you right then and there. You have no control over it. So you have to have a clear why. If you don't, then you're not going to make it.
100%. And the last question is, where can people find you? Where can they follow you? And where can they support what you have going on?
Okay, so on Instagram, you can find me at Legends, and that's LEGENDS period dad 300K. And on Twitter, you can find me at Legends_dad1. You can check out my car consulting business at www.limitlessautosolutions.com. And that's the easiest way to find me on all platforms.
Dope. So we will have all the links for that information in the show notes. A special shout out to all the show sponsors. Terry E. Joma, I'm an investor. The first sponsor is Todd Capital. I was like, I don't know why the number one sponsor should be me. So now all the show notes and the links, the first sponsors are myself. And that's a key to anybody who's listening to this show. You got to make sure you put your business first. It's cool to have sponsors, but make sure you put your business first. Nevertheless, also check out Hood Estates. Also check out Charm City Buyers. Check out Ericka Classic Climb. Check out Bravado Life. Check out 24/7 Watches. I was looking at the show notes and the sponsors, and I was like, dang, we got a lot of sponsors, which is dope because they're all Black businesses. And they're not even really just like Black businesses as much as they're like businesses that happen to be Black. So this is episode number 138. My name is Charles Oglesby with Legends Dad. I hope you guys got a lot from this episode. Make sure you follow him and support him on social media and Instagram and Twitter and all that cool stuff. 138, signing off. Dope. Oh, man, I didn't stop.